will be the greatest jobs president that God ever created. I tell you that.
Donald Trump making it official today in New York. We're going to continue our conversation about his candidacy with Miranda Kahn, J.D. Hayworth, our panel, Liz Peek, columnist for the Fiscal Times, and David Goodfriend, former deputy staff secretary to President Bill Clinton. Miranda?
David, I have to ask you, you just heard Trump say he will be the greatest jobs president that God ever created. David, do you think Donald is qualified enough to meet that high of a standard?
Well, you know, last night before I went to sleep, I said a little prayer and I begged for something to make this race even more hilarious. And look at what I got today. Donald Trump declaring for president. No, I would beg to differ with his assessment of himself, although he does have a very high opinion of himself. I think that the policies that he stands for have been proven wrong over and over again. And just because he was born into a rich family with a rich daddy who then allowed him to make more wealth doesn't make him able to find rising wages for the middle class, better employment across the American spectrum. And I think, but I do think this, I do think that he will antagonize Jeb Bush and Scott Walker and Marco Rubio to the point where they have to start answering to some of this. And that's a very slippery slope for the Republican presidential primary. I don't think he does his party any favors by forcing some of the more serious candidates to answer some of his claims.
All right, fair enough. Let me bring Liz back in here, David, because you've essentially said that despite his accomplishments, Trump is a joke. Liz, I want to go to you about this. Can a guy worth almost $9 billion really be a joke in this kind of race?
He's not a joke. I mean, he will be. I think your other guest is correct. He'll be disruptive to some degree because he has a lot of money. So he'll be in for a while. If he wants to stay in, you know, through all the debates and so forth, even if he doesn't poll well enough to get into debates, he can do that. He can afford to stay in this race. So I think that's correct that he's going to be somewhat disruptive, but he's not a joke. Look, he's a very powerful personality. He's going to have some impact, and he is going to, you know, if he's going to push people in terms of policy one way or another, it might be that they have to become a little harder edged. I mean, in some ways, he'll take the votes away from someone like Christie, because Christie also appeals to people who want a man's man. You know, they want somebody who's going to throw out some fireballs and see what happens.
And Lizzie, like you said, a man's man. He has a lot of business experience. He also doesn't have any political experience. Do you think that could appeal to some voters, David?
Absolutely, absolutely. He comes in kind of saying what he thinks, and you know, the reason people liked Chris Christie, and still do, many of them, is because he sounds genuine, he sounds authentic, and he says things that other people don't.
He does to some people. I'm sorry, that question was actually addressed to David. David, your thoughts?
Well, I actually see, in an interesting way, a parallel between Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders. You might think those are two completely different people, but listen to what they say about trade. Listen to what they say about the real unemployment rate and the jobs and the labor participation rate. They are actually saying the exact same thing. Two totally opposite ends of the political spectrum, but they both identify with a sentiment in the country.
And we will have to leave it there. David Goodfriend, Liz Peek, we thank you very much for your time. And we move from that discussion of concepts and political strategy to the numbers, because we asked you last night which Republican candidate you favored for the GOP nominee, and some of those numbers are coming in, Miranda.
That's right. Joining
us from the Newsmax newsroom, our good friend and Newsmax contributor, Morgan Thompson, with some of those poll results. Morgan, how does it look right now?
Well, JD and Miranda, with Donald Trump just making it official today, he didn't get much support. But the GOP presidential primary race is shaping up to be a very exciting and very crowded one. According to our poll, Senator Ted Cruz comes in on top with 18% of our viewers saying they want him as the nominee. The number 2 slot belongs to Dr. Ben Carson. Following far behind the top 2, Governors Scott Walker, Mike Huckabee, and Jeb Bush tie at 5%. So even though Ted Cruz is ahead in our poll, there is clearly no frontrunner.
Well, you know, we take a look at this, and Miranda, I guess the bottom line is it's mighty early, and it's night one of the polling.
It's still really, really, really early to tell. I think it's fair game for anybody right now, don't you?
Well, it is interesting.
For quite a few people. We have a dozen.
And more to come. And Morgan, I'm just interested in the follow-up, because how did people arrive at this decision? As I understand it, our Newsmax.com poll also asked what issues matter the most to people when choosing a president. Morgan, what were they saying the issues that mattered most in their minds?
Well, JD and Miranda, according to that poll, jobs and the economy were at the top, with nearly half of those answering saying that is the issue they focus on most. Over 1/4 of those polled listed traditional values as a primary concern, closely followed by national security. Healthcare came in at the bottom, with only 7% saying healthcare reform is a primary concern. Now, I wanted to tell you guys, when I was researching this story, I found it very interesting that around this time in the race in 1991, Bill Clinton was in 13th place in the polls, so anything can happen.
That is a very wise observation, Morgan Thompson. We thank you for checking the numbers and reporting into us. You know, the thing that really gets me, as you know, is the border. And Trump today was really laying it out. And
what did you think about the protesters, though, when Bush made his announcement?
Well, I think that everybody who runs has to get ready, and obviously those protesters don't think amnesty is enough. Listen, we want to continue to ask you, who are you supporting in the Republican primary? Here's where you need to go: newsmaxpolls.com to vote for the candidate of your choice. We'll continue to monitor those results through the week. And there is more to come as Newsmax Prime continues on this Tuesday. Stay with us.